Hey, welcome back. This is Chapter 6. And Chapter 6 is all about time management. This is probably one of the most important one of these chapters because this is the one that gets everybody excited. You don't see newspaper articles about how well you did. You see newspaper articles about how you blew the budget or how you blew the schedule. Okay. So let's go through the learning objectives as always. So here we go. Understand the importance of project schedules. Discuss the process of planning for schedules. Define the activities based upon all that. Describe how project managers use network diagrams and dependencies. Good. Understand the relationship between estimating resources and project schedules. Explain how various tools and techniques help project managers perform these activity duration estimates. Use a Gantt chart, use a PERT chart. Understand how time management is addressed using Agile. Discuss how reality checks and discipline and how project management software can help. Okay, so let's just start from the very beginning. Project schedules are really a big deal. There was an example that I like to use, and that is, you guys remember when they had the earthquakes in California and the Santa Monica Freeway collapsed, right? Well, they bid the contract so that the guy who does the construction would get a bonus if they completed it in faster than what the contract required. So these guys got together and they kicked ass. They did it 74 days early, which is precisely what this incentive was all about. It ended up making a bonus of $14 million due to them being able to get this thing done in a hurry. So yes, if you want it bad enough, you can kind of get it done. There's a side story behind this, which is kind of sort of interesting. And the state legislature went through, and by the way, they went nuts over this. They think, that's excessive. And it's like, well, not really, because, we told them we really want this done as fast as humanly possible, so we're willing to pay. Okay. But the state legislature kind of went nuts, and they had all sorts of hearings and passed laws about, how many bonuses you can get and, all sorts of crazy stuff. But anyway, the point of the story is this is all about scheduling. It's all about scheduling. Okay. There's a couple of catchphrases that kind of come up, and we're going to kind of use them. I'll just go ahead and give them to you now. The first one is, creating a schedule is easy. Following the schedule is not. Okay, those are kind of obvious ones, right? Another one that I kind of like is, of all of the constraints that you have, money, people, time, whatever it is, time is the least flexible. I can go get more money. I can go get more materials. I can go get more people, but I can't go get more time. It doesn't work. Okay, so it's the least flexible of all the things, the one that causes you the most trouble. And if you were to use this example backwards, let's use an example where, the original contract was supposed to take a year to do, and it ended up taking 2 years, okay? You've heard all those stories, right? And the press, it kind of goes and looks at the original schedule. On day one, it says a year, and they said, aha, you missed it. And somebody somewhere needs to raise their hand and said, yes, but I got approved for this modification, and this modification, and this modification, and this modification. Actually, I'm ahead of schedule. The point of that story is they tend to forget about the modifications to the schedule. They look at only the original schedule and the final schedule completion date and look at the two. That's not fair. It makes for great, journalism kind of, scare tactic headlines. This project is $14 million over budget and a year late. Those make great headlines, but in reality, it's just not true. Each one of those, there was no delays. We did precisely what we told you we're going to do, and every time you made a modification to this thing, the budget went up and the schedule got stretched. Okay, so people often tend to ignore or forget that approved modifications have an effect on the schedule, so you cannot compare just the front one and the end one. Okay, on page 222, you need to read the case study because we're going to be talking about it a bit. And as always, kind of just pause the video, take a minute, read the case study. When you're done, come on back. Okay, I assume you've done that. All right, here we go. So essentially, this is like for a college they're trying to get a scheduling system, and they want it by the 1st of May because that's when the school starts. So basically, it had to be done by the 1st of May. Really, that's the whole point. And there's some problems, though. If you read the case study, some of their external partners, like they were supposed to have meetings with the people at the university, but during semester break, they were all gone. And so you couldn't have those scheduled meetings because the people weren't around. And then maybe there was a lead software developer who quit. And so now you're kind of sort of behind. The real issue here is that let's just talk about the external one. So I planned to have meetings with these people and they were not available. So you could say, well, whose fault is that? But in reality, it doesn't really matter, okay? It doesn't really matter. If you were to take that tactic with me, well, it wasn't my fault, I had scheduled it, and I say, well, then you did a poor job of scheduling. You should have found out whether these people were going to be available or not. See, okay. So whose fault it is irrelevant. You were supposed to have anticipated these things. Okay, so we're going to talk about this case throughout the chapter, as always. To start with, they talk on page 222, they talk about the importance of project schedules. I mean, this is fairly obvious, right? Come on, the importance of a schedule. But they go ahead and have some other cool things to talk about. One is that it's often the source for conflicts. This is where you're going to get into trouble. This is where you're going to get chewed out on, okay? This is really, really, really where things happen, is the whole concept of you're late or you didn't anticipate. So oddly enough, they take a kind of a spin here, and they talk about personality traits. So let's do that. So Briggs-Meyer, if you're a psychology person, you know all this stuff, talks about these 4 axes. Are you inwardly or outwardly focused, and how do you like your information? How do you make decisions, and how do you do outside life? And so these 4 letters, an E or an I, an S or an N, a T or an F or J or a P, kind of puts you in one of these little boxes. So if I'm an ISTJ person, these are kind of what my personality traits are. Now, I can tell you that some of you students wait to the very last minute. Okay, these homework assignments and quizzes are due at midnight on Sunday. Some of you guys probably don't start work on it until 10 o'clock, right? So I'm talking to you. If you were on my team working on a project, I'd be having some problems. It's your personality trait. It's like, don't worry about it. I'll get to it sooner or later, and it's okay. It's not due today, is it? I'll work on it tomorrow. That's the kind of personality traits you kind of need to be paying attention to, because if you got a bunch of people like that on your team, wow, your job as being a manager, managing the schedule is going to be really, really rough. Okay, so once again, I can tell that a lot of you guys wait for the last minute. And sometimes it's a cultural thing. Let me give you another story. So many years ago, I'm flying to the Bahamas, so I'm on vacation. So we go to Florida, and there's one flight that goes from Florida to this place we want to go in the Bahamas. And so we're standing around the airport, and I said, okay, this is the 10 o'clock flight. Okay, cool. And so we jump on the plane and we go to the Bahamas. And then when it comes time for our return trip, we go to the airport, and they said, it's the morning flight. What? It's the same flight. I mean, going in opposite direction. But they do the same flight every single day. But on the Florida side, it's called the 10 o'clock flight. On the Bahamas side, it's called the morning flight. And they just weren't all that interested in making sure that plane left on time. Okay, it's just kind of a cultural thing. So, yes, you kind of sort of need to be aware of some of the personality types and culture types that could impact your ability to manage a schedule. Okay. All right, so there's a definition, but it's incredibly obvious. So the project schedule is processes required to ensure the timely completion of a project. Whoopee! Okay. So they talk about 7 processes that they do, and this is the same theme. Every chapter starts the same way, right? They have this little goofy chart, and they show all the 7, or in this case there's 7 processes that you go through to do whatever the chapter is about. This one clearly is about scheduling. So let's just go through them, and then we'll go through it in a little bit more detail. So first off is the planning schedule management. Basically, are there any policies you need to be aware of? Like, for example, overtime or the ability to hire temporary employees. You need to kind of sort of know what your company or organization's, policies are for those kinds of things. Can I hire temp? Can I pay overtime? And if so, does that come out of the same budget? Blah, 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 blah. Defining the activities. Now, we've done this before. This is the WBSs, except in the previous one, we kind of had sort of like top-level WBSs. Now we're getting to a little bit more. We're going through and listing all the activities and getting a little bit more definition on the WBS. So, a lot more to it. And typically, when you get to this point, each one of these things is going to have a duration and a start. Before the previous chapter, it was just a listing, basically, and you really didn't have the sequencing down or the start or any of that stuff. And so the next one is sequencing. That makes obviously sense. So sequencing is all about dependencies, right? Before I install the software, I need to write the software. So writing the software and then installing the software, and there's a little arrow that jumps from one to the other. I can't start this task until this one is complete. Okay, cool. Estimating resources, and they make 2 different things on resources. One is those resources like equipment and materials and those kinds of things. So people, but people, equipment, materials. So that's all estimating those resources. And then they talk about activity durations. And so this is not exactly the same. Let me explain up front what we're talking about. Let's say, for example, that the duration is the clock time. Okay, the clock time on how long it's going to take. So let me give you an example. All right. I had roof damage one time because we had hail. Okay. And so this crew came in, and they had 8 people on the crew, and they did my entire roof of my house in about 4 hours. I mean, they had just descended on it, ripped the old thing off, put the new one on, and they were gone by midday. I mean, it was amazing because they had a crew size of 8. So the duration is 4. Now, if one guy showed up to do that, rather than a crew of 8, it would have taken 2 days, or whatever the math is. And so, therefore, my duration is 2. So, duration is not the level of effort. Okay? It's not man hours, because 8 times 4 was how many man hours it took to make that roof repair happen in 4 duration hours. Okay, good, you got it. All right. There's some key things that we're going to talk about a little later on that's not really in the book, and sometimes these things come up, and that is like minimum crew size. It could be, for example, if you're doing something dangerous, like high voltage electrician, or you're digging a hole, and you're sending some down in a hole, is a minimum crew size of 2. You don't have like 1 person on the roof. You need to have 2, right? Okay, so that comes out. Next, on the developing the schedule. That's pretty straightforward. That's where you produce all of those low-level WBSs. Okay, cool. And then controlling and monitoring. Well, that's where the fun began. This is the part about, cracking the whip. Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit. About managing the thing and asking for status and making sure that people are doing what they're doing. One of the things that we're going to talk about when we get there is you can't just take people's word for it. You can't say, for example, so how are you doing are you guys on schedule for phase 3 in this project? And the guy says, oh yeah, sure, in fact, we're doing just fine. And then turned to find out that basically he was too afraid or embarrassed to say that they were not on schedule. So you can't just casually ask them. You need to be managing this stuff, really, really managing, doing reports and checking and verifying. You can't just say, hey, how you guys doing? Oh, okay, everything's good, great. I'll go back and watch cartoons and drink coffee. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, so we'll pause this and pick it up in just a few.